Do you see a way to make sure decisions such as granting clemency are not made by prosecutors in the Justice Department, or at least not primarily by the people in the Justice Department?
Yeah, so right now, if you want to get clemency, so if you want to get a pardon and you want to get your record cleared, or you want to get a commutation, which would be a reduction of your sentence that you're currently serving, the process would be that you would file a petition in the Department of Justice. So you're going to the same agency that brought your case in the first place. And you file it with the Office of the Pardon Attorney. And one of the very first things that the Office of the Pardon Attorney does is goes to the U.S. Attorney's Office that brought your case and asks them, hey, what do you think? Now, I don't think anyone in their right mind designing a clemency process would say, who should be in charge of that? The same people who brought the case in the first place. I mean, no one can objectively evaluate their own prior case and not have a thumb on the scale in favor of their prior decision. It's crazy. And it wasn't even like that was originally well thought out. It was kind of happenstance that clemency ended up being put in the Department of Justice. So for sure, the first thing that should happen is the Office of the Pardon Attorney, or whomever is going to advise the president on clemency, should not be in the Department of Justice. It should not have to go through the chain of command where it ultimately goes to the Deputy Attorney General, who is the person at the Department of Justice who is essentially in charge of all criminal prosecutions. And so the DAG, the Deputy Attorney General, deals with all the U.S. attorneys' offices all the time and is not going to want to create a situation where they're recommending overturning case decisions by those same people. It's awkward, and they don't want to create that kind of weird tension in their relationship unless it's a really strong case. But we've seen from the track record that what they view as a really strong case is so miserly that they recommend no on everything. So you got to take it out of the Department of Justice. And I think the best way to do it is for the president to just set up an advisory board that is bipartisan and that has a diversity of views represented, including people on there who have themselves been incarcerated, because they're in a really good position to help explain and understand prison records, right? They can really tell you, if you look at somebody's prison record and there's no disciplinary infractions, they can tell you how hard that is in light of the conditions under which people are living. They have that lived experience, which is hugely valuable. You should have people on there who understand reentry and can really explain what it'll be like if you give someone a commutation. Are they going to succeed when they come back out? What does their reentry plan look like? You can have someone on the advisory board who is in law enforcement, who is a prosecutor. So you could still have that DOJ input. They just shouldn't be the decision maker. And I think having an advisory body like that is, knowledgeable about the real issues with clemency, which would be, let's think about who this person is today and whether they can be safely released if it's a commutation. And if it's a pardon, really thinking about what the collateral consequences of their conviction are doing to them. Those are the key questions. The key questions aren't 20 years ago when they committed the crime, what did the witnesses say? We're asking who they are today. And prosecutors have really very little to tell us about that. They're really all about what happened 20 years ago. And that's not what the core clemency determination is or should be. So I think my hope is that they take it out of DOJ. So many of the Democratic candidates for president had promised to do that in their presidential platforms. Vice President-elect Harris promised that. President-elect Biden didn't go so far as to say that. And so, we'll see if it becomes part of what he does. It was part of the Unity Task Force recommendation that the Sanders-Biden representatives put out. And so it may be that he's ready to do it now, but we have to wait and see.
Adam Johnson and Nima Shirazi of the podcast Citations Needed have recently spoken about how task forces are sometimes organized by politicians to take the air out of social movements and to just look like these politicians are doing something without advancing meaningful reforms. How specifically could left-wing progressive groups try to influence the incoming administration on these criminal justice reforms and make sure this task force or this commission actually has power to affect change?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a really good point you're raising. I don't love the task force model. It's usually a way to kick the can down the road and not do much of anything. Like the big policing task force in the Obama administration. It's not that they didn't have good recommendations. It's just like they go into the ether and nothing gets done. Clemency is a little different though, because, it's always an as compared to what question. With clemency right now, nothing is getting done. President Obama had to create an initiative in order to get the clemency grants that he wanted because he could not use the existing structure to get the grants that he needed. And so he didn't create a commission. He asked the private bar to help him. And so it was a managerial kind of nightmare. And one of the reasons it didn't fulfill its potential is because he didn't create an advisory body or a commission model, but he knew he couldn't use the status quo. And I think that's the key with clemency. The status quo will get you next to nothing. Keeping it in the Department of Justice will get you next to nothing. So this is an instance where creating an advisory body or even just taking the pardon attorney out of DOJ and having them report directly to the president, that's a less attractive option to me, but still better than having it go all the way through Department of Justice. The idea is to create a model that is more likely to generate positive recommendations for grants. But at the end of the day, it's up to President Biden whether he grants them. And there's really nothing that, the buck stops with him. With clemency, it's entirely up to the president. He can't blame Congress. He can't blame gridlock. He can't blame money. He could, on the first day he goes into office with the stroke of a pen, if he wanted to, he could release every single person in federal prison. And there's nothing to stop him. So for this one, the idea of the advisory body is to help him make good decisions, but the person who'll be accountable for those decisions is him. And I think the advisory body model might help give him a little bit of political cover, because when it comes to clemency, the worry is always that you're going to give a sentence reduction to someone, and the fear is that they go on to commit a horrendous crime. And then it calls into question what kind of judgment you had as the decision maker to let them out earlier than they otherwise would have been let out. So he's going to want to be careful to make sure his decisions are sensible. And should there be a situation where that happens, he can say, look, that was just not predictable. I had this body of experts, bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats. We all agreed this person should be released, and you have to take a little bit of risk in order to get benefits. It's no different than any other governmental policy. Does the new vaccine have risks? Yes. But overall, is it going to yield enormous benefits for health? Of course. And so you weigh costs and benefits, and we have to do that in criminal law. So he's going to need to explain that to people. And I do think an advisory body can help him. But I think it's a unique model for clemency, and it's not something I would recommend across the board. I think for things like policing reforms, he's just going to need a really great head of the Civil Rights Division to really go in there. I hope he puts Vanita Gupta back in, because I think that was a shining light in the Obama administration that really, she did a lot. And that was really the best part of the Department of Justice under the Obama administration. And he's going to need to do something like that. And he can't just, rely on a task force to tell him what to do later.